You're listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 128. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where I show you how life with less alcohol is more fun than you think. I work with high achievers who struggle to drink a glass of wine without it turning into 2 bottles. I'm the one they call when they want to take it or leave it. So if you want to change your relationship with alcohol that doesn't involve counting days sober, you're in the right place. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I want to talk about what happens after an overdrink. Right, I talk a lot about intention and plans and being willing to take the hard action. But in many ways, what happens after we overdrink is the most important time as you are going through this process of changing your relationship with alcohol. Why? Because it often feels like the hardest time, right? It's when all the difficult emotions come out. It's easy to take action from a place where things are going well. When you're having success, right? You're going to feel motivated to do more. But when things don't go to plan, it's quite something else. But the upside I want to offer is that this is when you can make the most progress. And there is always so much good stuff to learn after an overdrink if you are willing to look. It gives us so much insight, for one thing, into how the pattern of drinking is playing out for you. Because life marches on, time marches on. Whatever you do, after you overdrink, the world keeps spinning, right? You can't control what has happened in the past, but you do control how you respond. Now, you probably say that a lot, but I want to extend that philosophy out. How you respond will not only determine what you do in the current moment, right, the action you're going to currently make, but that will also in turn determine what you're going to be willing to do in the future. And by changing the action you take now and in the future, that's how you ultimately change your results. The one follows the other. So again, after an overdrink, when things look to be going all wrong, that is probably the most important time. Now, I talk a lot about changing your relationship with alcohol and how you want to interact with it, right? Purposefully and with intention. But really, the act of changing this relationship comes down to your relationship with you, right? With how you plan, with how you take action, with how you feel your emotions, right? With how you decide to become the person you want to be. This is how we change and how we evolve and how we learn in life. Or, by the way, how we don't, right? We can decide to just ignore all those lessons and pretty much stay the same. And that's how we end up staying stuck in the patterns that we don't want. It's actually like this with everything in life, right? All the things we do, all the challenges we face, the obstacles we overcome or not, it all comes down to how we see ourselves and what we're willing to do for ourselves. And changing your relationship with alcohol is so seismic. It has such a tremendous knock-on effect with every area, actually, of your life, that it's going to have the most astounding influence on changing your relationship with you. I speak to so many people who say this is really, the last thing they need to work on. It's their Achilles heel. It's the thing they just want to figure out in their life, but they feel perhaps all at sea. So we tend to, and I for sure did this back in the day, we kind of build this thing up to be, there's just this thing that I can't figure out, I don't know how to do, I've been trying for all these years and keep going back on myself, right? We build that up. But I want you to imagine how you might feel on the other side of that, right? You will feel, I'm telling you now, you're going to feel like a superhero. You really are. You're going to be pinching yourself to think, how is this me? How is this my life? You'll live in that for a bit and then it will just become kind of normal. And then you'll be like, look at me go. And still to this day, I sometimes pause and think, I'm so pleased that past Anna didn't give up. I'm so pleased that past Anna gave me the opportunity to change really how I viewed French Chablis, because French Chablis, frankly, has stayed the same, right? How I viewed it and what impact I wanted it to have on my life. At its base, I want you to remember that what you're doing here is learning a skill. You are learning the skill of drinking 2 glasses of wine on a Friday and calling that good. You're learning the skill of deciding ahead of time how much you're going to drink, however much temptation may be thrown at you. You are learning the skill of feeling a craving or an urge all the way through and not freaking out. You are learning the skill of creating the life you want without the fog of alcohol being there, dulling the bits that aren't so great, or without you feeling that you need to enhance the good bits. These are all skills. You've heard me say this before. I can't state it enough. These are skills just like when you want to learn anything new in life, really anything. Now, as we go through this, especially when we're looking at the action we take after an overdrink, I tend to see 4 characters emerge, 4 character types, 4 roles, if you like. Firstly, I see the narrator. This is where you are playing out the script. You know the story very well. It's the one you've been reading and acting out for decades. You know the lines. You know you're off book, as they might say in the acting profession. You know exactly what's going to happen. This is of no surprise. How do you recognize yourself if you are the narrator? Well, after an overdrink, you will say things like, told you so. Oh, I always do this. Of course. I never change. I'm never going to change. This is just who I am. It's in my genes, you know. Did you know I come from a family of heavy drinkers? So that's the narrator. And then we have the fighter. Now, this one can, at first glance, look really positive, right? The fighter is strong. You're resilient, and you know you are. You have conquered many obstacles in your life. You have a seemingly endless capacity for hard work. And you can really, you put your mind to things. You don't take no for an answer. You're type A. You leap into action. This, by the way, is me. This was my scenario that I would play out. How do you recognize yourself in this? Well, after an overdrink, you will say things like, I just need to dig deeper. I need to do better next time. I've just got to keep trying. I've just got to keep going. This will work if it's the last thing I do. I will fix this. The next one is the confused. How do you recognize this? Well, after an overdrink, you're going to say things like, I don't know why. I keep doing this. This doesn't make any sense. Logically, I know what to do. I have a great life, so why on earth do I keep on repeating the same old pattern that I know doesn't work? I always seem to self-sabotage and I haven't got a clue why. That is the confused. That's how you might keep stuck after an overdrink. And then finally, we have the scientist. How do you recognize if you're the scientist? Well, after an overdrink, you might say, I wonder why that happened. What can I try? Interesting. What would happen if I did this instead? Or I notice a trend appearing and what might be fun to have a go? Each of these characters are driven by a feeling, right? And what I typically see is the following. These are the feelings I see associated. So if you're the narrator, you're kind of just reading the script. The feeling here is helpless. Within the sense of whatever action you take, you don't really think it's going to change because nothing has so far. And that's not part of the script either. It's not part of the story. Never has been, never will be. If you are the fighter, and again, this was me. This feels very close to the bone for me just reading this. The sensation you might have is desperation followed in quick succession by exhaustion. Because on the face of it, the fighter can look powerful. But when you're taking action, fueled just to take action without pausing to get insight, right? Just going at it again and again and again. It's just a lot of activity here. It's exhausting. You just fight and it feels like it's taking over your life, right? That's where you can get stuck in. If you're the confused, well, that one's easy to see what emotion is driving it. It is, yes, confusion. And this is when you're living in I don't know land. You're going to find yourself spinning. You, in fact, may be doing a lot of thinking about what you need to do, but second guessing yourself and then not being sure. So you end up, guess what? Not really knowing what to do, so you do nothing. The confused state, the confused person will not take a lot of action, but you still might feel that you're actually actively working on it because your head is spinning, right? You've got all these dramatic thoughts in your head, but you're still not taking any action to fix the situation. Now, the scientist is fueled by curiosity. Remember I said that this work is all about creating a different relationship with yourself? Well, think about it. That is a very unique thing. Your relationship with you is unique. Your relationship with other people is unique. Your relationship with things, how you feel about things, is going to be unique to you. Now, the scientists, what they do is they take learnings from out in the world, they observe things, and then they test, and then they apply them to their life, and they figure out what works best for them. And this is why I love one-on-one coaching, because it's really about applying all my body of work in a very specific, targeted way to your life to make your life better. And this is how we can get fast results. Now, I want you to imagine that whether you're the narrator, fighter, confused, or scientist, whichever of these you are, you can give yourself some grace for that. We don't want to go into beating ourselves up for being, for instance, a narrator, as that's what's going to take us down a whole other path of storytelling, right? I'm the narrator. Oh, I've always been like that. I never learn, right? You see how that can sort of fall in on itself. No, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do instead is we are going to accept, and that's how you've been. That's been your reality. But you can put a lab coat on and you can step into curiosity. I'm going to teach you all how to become scientists. I really love this idea of putting on a lab coat. I want you to really think about that. You can go back to your school days. If that's, for me, you haven't been in a science lab for many years. You go into the science lab with your school uniform on, or we did at least in the UK, and then you put on a lab coat that was to protect your clothes. Right, so that's because you're preparing. You're going to be doing experiments. You're becoming the person that does the work in that environment. So that's what we're going to do here. Whether whatever we are, whether narrator, fighter, or confused, we can put on a lab coat and we can start to turn ourselves into being a scientist. And as we put on that lab coat, we're going to step into curiosity. And your job is only to ask questions. I want you to learn how to pick holes in the story you have been telling yourself for years. Whether you're a narrator, you can pick holes in that story if you've got your lab coat on. If you're a fighter, you can pick holes in that story of being the fighter, right? And where has that fallen down for you? Ditto, if you're the confused, you can say, look, let's look at my position of being confused. Why am I continuing to be that way? Where has it worked? Where has it not worked? Because all roads lead to curiosity, basically. Because when we're curious, we're being compassionate and we're in solution creation mode. We are actively looking for what we might not have seen. We are actively questioning. It's much lighter. We are much more open than if we are just assuming we already have all the answers and it doesn't matter what we try, nothing's going to work. I mean, scientists are not that way. They are curious creatures. But really the value of being the scientist is that we become curious, and when we're curious, we are compassionate, and we're compassionate, we're in solution creating mode. Let me give you an example of how this operates in a completely different area of life. I'm going to talk about baking quiches, and I hope everybody knows what a quiche is, but it's basically a pastry case with a liquid filling that you bake in the oven. And the tricky thing when baking a quiche, or in fact any recipe that has a crisp outer layer and then the liquid filling, is to not have so-called a soggy bottom, to have the pastry underneath be nice and crisp, even though you've got all this wet stuff in it. Now, I didn't see whether I could bake a quiche or not as part of my identity, but I want to talk about this now because it's such a very specific example, and it can act as a kind of a template of how we can make a change, right, when things don't go to plan. So for years, I actually was the narrator here. For years, I said I couldn't do it. I told anyone when I was chatting about baking, I said, I'm very good. I'm a very good baker, actually. I can bake cakes, scones, the lot, right? Very involved cakes. I even made a cake when our children were leaving a school that had the initials of the school inside the cake, right? So when you cut it open, you actually saw the double H inside. hours I went into that, but I was able and capable of doing it. I didn't know how to do it, but I figured out. So I see myself as a very accomplished baker, apart from pastry, and especially quiches. I told other people, I told myself this when I went shopping, I told myself this when I was planning a picnic, I told anyone, right? And then what happened, it was over COVID, and my husband was in one country and I was in another. And I was talking with him and he said how much he was enjoying eating these mini quiches, that he had bought some mini quiches with salad. And I thought, so when I get to see him again, it would be such fun to have a quiche. We could then have a quiche and it would kind of be a fun thing we could do. But then I thought, I can't do that, right? So I decided I was going to make a project. Fast forward to the end results these days, and right now, I will tell you hands down, I make the best quiche in the world. I am a great, very, very accomplished quiche baker and a great lemon tart baker too, because I get the shortest, crispiest pastry, irrespective of the filling. Lovely. It's just fantastic. Now, as life achievements go, this is not really up there, I know. But the important thing I want to talk about here is by teaching myself this, and even when it was all going wrong, I changed my relationship with myself, right? So I was the narrator on this for years, but then I decided to go to work. And it was many different periods here. First, I decided I could do it. I decided it would be possible. And I start this work with my clients, right? And we start working together. We're just going to decide this is possible. The outcome you want is possible. You don't see it yet. We just decide it's possible. So I decided it was possible for me to bake a great quiche. And then I looked at some recipes. I went back to basics. I took some instruction. It was disaster after disaster after disaster. I had all the thoughts and all the feelings, right? This is stupid. Why do you just accept you can't do this? This really isn't that important in your life. You're wasting an awful lot of time on this. You can just buy one. We all have things we can't do. Why on earth are you becoming so fixated on this? So all this time while my husband was overseas with COVID, my youngest son and I, we were eating an awful lot of quiche. But I kept trying to say, I'm not going to give up on this. And then I had a bit of a breakthrough, worked, and then I couldn't replicate it, right? And then it was all a bit hit or miss. And it would actually take me a few weeks, and I'd have to really concentrate on each step, and I would analyze and write down what I learned and then do it again. I mean, really, I went to town on this until I got it. And I have completely rewritten the story. Like I said, I am a truly excellent quiche maker. I don't believe it's hard. It doesn't take me a long time. I can whip one up without really thinking about it. It is really not difficult. They pretty much come out brilliantly the whole time. Right? And every single time I do this, I'm telling you, every single time I do this, I feel like Wonder Woman, because I so appreciate what I went through and what I put into this. This is how my relationship with myself changed. I rewrote the story I had narrated to myself for years. So every time I make a quiche and someone compliments on me on it, because they do, I will take the compliment. I'll say thank you. I know what went into it. I thank past Anna. I see it as proof that I'm really a capable person. And I have evidence in just this area of quiche making that I can be the scientist, because that's what I did. I threw my lab coat on and I tackled it. I can look at what not worked. I can get help and I can turn it around. It's the same thing that I did when I changed my relationship with alcohol. It's the same thing I teach my clients. So I want your homework as a result of this episode, especially when you're in an overdrink situation, when something hasn't gone wrong, I want you to see what you can do to get into scientist. Whether you're narrator, fighter, or confused, you can move to scientist by asking yourself questions. And here are some helpful ones to get you started. To start with, you might just want to reflect. I can't change what I've already done. That often helps me to I say it out loud. It's level sets. And then ask yourself things like, trying again isn't as scary as I'm making it out to be, is it? Or what's one thing I can decide to try tomorrow? What would future Anna do? What feels fun to try? What's worked for other people? How could I apply that to my life? If I had to guess at just one tiny thing to try, what would it be? And again, if you do this after an overdrink, when you've got all the evidence of all the stuff, all the things that went wrong, you can just pick one little thing, Ask the questions, get curious, and then try again. And the more you do this, the more you will rewrite your story as to whether you're a narrator, you're confused, or whether you're the fighter. So in summary, the work you do on changing your relationship with alcohol really will change your life, because you'll be changing your relationship with you. You can for sure do this on your own. You will be in the slow lane, because it takes some effort to remember to do this and to know how to do this and to get all your ducks in a row. Or you can take the super highway and work with me to get you there fast. See me as a kind of like your chauffeur. I'll be driving you down the super highway, helping you to get to your goal fast, if that's what you want. And if you're listening to this podcast, I'm guessing that's what you want. Go to 90dayslater.co and let's talk about how that would look. And really, this is not as scary as you think it might be. All right, and I will see you next week. If you like what you're learning in the podcast and you want to take the work further and achieve total freedom around alcohol, let's talk. I help my clients stop reaching for that first glass of wine the moment 6 p.m. rolls around and they don't miss out on life. Email me for more information on anna@90dayslater.co. And if you did enjoy the show, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a rating and review to help others find the 90 Days Later podcast.